Bonjour Daniel et bienvenue à tout le monde. C'est mon plaisir de présenter notre équipe. As you are well aware, your management team is Colin Shaw, Elizabeth Brittle, Kelly Truesdale, and I'm Emily Crow. So we're here today to talk about Naya Waters. Why are we here? Well, we've got a lot of new situations in front of us. We have, of course, new owners with Catterton Partners. We have a demand that they've given us to grow substantially in the coming years. And there's also a changing landscape with the water industry. So the question is, what do we do now? We want to address this question in a few ways because we know what the water industry looks like today. But with all the changes coming, with new environmental regulations, what is it going to look like in 5 years? We want to make sure whatever plan we have fits us today, but also gets us to where we need to be, where we can adjust to the changing landscape. When you walk out of here today, we want you to walk away with 3 things. Number 1, can we really triple revenues and double profits in the next 4 years? That's what's demanded us of Catterton. Number 2, in order to do this, do we need to drastically change our product offerings or the way our company is structured? And then finally, in answer to all of that, we want to give you a strategic plan that grows revenue, fits our company culture, and is going to satisfy Catterton, our new owners.
In order to maximize our time together today, we've outlined an agenda. We're first going to go over the background so we're all on the same page as to why we're here today. Then we're going to go into a reality check so we all have a clear understanding about the water industry and our current position. We're going to go through a qualitative, quantitative analysis, then go through some of all the alternatives that are presented before us. We're going to go into our implementation plan, then go through our timeline, budget, additional considerations, and then finally leave time for questions and answers.
So now we'd like to go through a little bit of the relevant background information. As you know, the bottled water industry had some pretty significant growth, easily in the double digits in the early part of its existence. However, this growth has started to decline on a year-over-year basis, and in the most recent time, it's actually been negative. What we need to look at is, especially in Canada, environmental concerns are starting to really change the customer preferences that make people want to buy bottled water. You know, many of the original purposes of bottled water was you used to buy a lot of bottled water and put it at home. And this has really been taken away, in fact, replacement of bulk water, water filters, and that type of thing. And really, what we're looking for is the next big thing in water. In 5 years, where's the bottled water industry going to be? Is it going to be bottled water? Is it going to be the reusable aluminum containers, reusable glass containers, filling stations? We really need to look forward in the future and see where bottled water was going to be. That way we can figure out how to capitalize on the market. Some background more specific to Naya Water. Naya was a major player in the Quebec market. We have a pretty significant market share, second only to Nestle. And well, after losing our North American distribution back in the late 90s from Coca-Cola, we had to go bankrupt. We were purchased by Danone, the group at that point, and they restructured us to be a key player in the Quebec market. But however, we are just a key player in the Quebec market. Our largest market share outside of that is only about 0.5%.
All right, so excuse me. I think one of the key questions that we need to answer today is if we want to triple revenues, do we either increase the size of the pie or do we increase our share of the pie? Now, it's important that we ground all of our decisions in reality here. There were a lot of alternatives here that were presented to us, and some of them seemed a little bit more sexy than others. But we want to make sure that everything here that we say is grounded in reality and will actually help us to triple our revenues in 4 years. So first and foremost, the market is shrinking. But while it paints a little bit of a pessimistic picture for us, this market is still going to be here in 5 to 10 years. That's something that we can be fairly sure of. There may be some new technologies coming out. We would like to be on the forefront of those. But the core market of bottled water, we still feel will be here, maybe at a lower level. The other thing is, while tripling our revenue does sound lofty, in absolute terms, is it really that lofty? That's something we need to look at as we examine our total revenue. Is tripling our revenue really going to be that lofty of a goal? And the last point is we have exciting cross-selling opportunities with Catterton. They have a great portfolio of brands, and we can capitalize on that and their distribution networks to help us expand our product reach. And water, it's never going to be a product that's going to get people to change stores for. People aren't going to go shopping for specific water, specific stores. So we need to realize that within ourselves. Now, as we go on, it's important that we realize who is affected in our decisions. Now, as we go over a stakeholders analysis, most everybody's going to be affected by our decisions, and that's why we've circled most everybody. But I think the most important thing is that we realize Catterton Associates, because they've asked us to triple the revenues, the plan that we present to them needs to make sense and needs to be realistic.
As part of our qualitative analysis, it's really important that we understand the competitive landscape. First and foremost, water is a commodity. It's a low-price product, and profit margins are low. So it's important to understand that competition is tough. Additionally, there's a threat of substitutes, juices, soda, tap water. If the consumers go in another direction, this could threaten our business. New entrants, it's pretty easy for the big players to change their message to more sustainable, and this could threaten our existence. And then finally, the buyers in this arrangement really have the power. They're the ones that dictate the prices, and we need to remember that.
So with all of these forces acting against us, we took a look at our value proposition. Why is it that our customers are buying Naya water? What we looked at is a different elements of our product and then also of our production, our distribution, our supply source, things like that. And we really felt like our quality and our reputation locally is something that gives us a strategic advantage. We have spring water and we have a wonderful relationship with the Quebec community. Going on to our production, distribution has been a downfall for us, as we've seen earlier, going bankrupt in the early 2000s when we lost our relationship. However, if we can bring it up just a tiny bit, it's our processes being as green as we are and our resources, this new energy and financial support brought to us by Catterton that's going to give us the edge we think we need to make them happy.
Okay, now we'd like to move on to a brief amount of quantitative analysis. First, we're going to look at our revenues. The total Canadian bottled water market is about $440 million. This is really actually quite small when you compare it to something like the U.S. market, which was about $11.8 billion. So really, if you look at the number of liters of water sold versus the amount of revenue, it basically gives us about 42 cents per liter cost of water. And really, while our 4.6 Canadian market share, that gives us an approximate revenue of about $2.1 million a year, which means we're a fairly small player in the global market. And really, if we triple this to meet our Catterton revenues expectations, we're about $6.3 million a year. Again, still a small player. Again, initially, what we need to do to compare the cost is we need to see what the cost to us versus what the end-use price of this water is. And one thing we really wanted to do was compare the Canadian market to the U.S. market. The Canadian market sells typically a 24-pack of half-liter bottles of water. This is about 12 liters of water for $24, or about $2 per liter. If you take the same measuring statistic and analyze the amount of revenue per liter of U.S. water, at the end-use level, it's about $4.88 per liter. And really, this shows that the U.S. market spends significantly more on water than the Canadian market.
So as we analyze how we move forward and the potential impact on sales, we need to look at where we're going to go. So if we decide to focus exclusively on the Canadian market, we need to triple revenues, we need to triple supply. We need to triple the distribution. Those are factors that lead into this distribution. As we look at the United States market, because the United States pays approximately 2.44 times more per liter of water, that would mean that we would only need to sell 1.25 times or 125% more water rather than 300% more water if we focus exclusively on the Canadian market, which is why a mixture of both is something that we need to look into, because that would require less infrastructure for us, looking into supplying less water, and it may be a little bit less costly for us to do this.
So now as we get ready to outline the strategic plan we've set out for you, we want to look at what it means to have a successful project. We feel like the critical success factors are, of course, to make Catterton happy. We do this by increasing revenue and our profit the way they've asked us to within that 4-year time frame. And finally, we want to add in, it's important for us to stay green. That's really something, not only is it important to our customers, we believe, but we think our staff and the employees that we have right now, that's a big part of our identity as a company. So as we try and satisfy Catterton and increase revenue, we have to do that. Going to the metrics of success, this means we have to grow revenue, as we mentioned earlier, 3 times within 4 years, and we want to double profit within that same 4-year period.
Now, we were presented with a lot of alternatives from our team, and we gave a good amount of consideration to every single one. And we believe that the plan that we came up with incorporates a lot of different ideas from these plans, but it also incorporates some new things that we think will drive the revenue growth and also the profit growth that Catterton has talked about. The first one is expanding into Canada. Will this or won't this triple revenue? We don't think that this will all the way triple our revenue if we expand nationally, because part of the problem is we also need to keep costs down. While nothing was specifically mentioned about the cost, that's an important driver. If we start shipping bottles all over Canada, our costs are going to skyrocket. And does this keep us all the way green? We can introduce some initiatives, but it may not ultimately help us accomplish our goal of being a green water producer. We can also expand solely in the United States. Yet again, this may or may not triple our revenue if we just focus on one market. May or may not help us keep our costs down, while we can expand into the northeastern United States, which will help us keep our costs down rather than going all the way to Vancouver or Alberta or places like that. It may still increase our costs more than we can handle. And also, again, it may not help us to stay incredibly green. As we look at the next options, expanding in just Quebec. Quebec is not the largest market that we could focus on, so again, may not help us triple our revenue, but it would probably help us keep our costs down because it is closer. Again, it may or may not help us to stay green because of the options that we choose. And if we decide to revolutionize the water industry, we need to realize that if we go that path, that's going to take a long time. Is that going to triple our revenues within 4 years? Probably not, because of the market adoption rate. That's something, as we look into the product life cycle, we can see that that's probably not going to help us triple our revenue. So we felt that that would not get us there. Probably wouldn't help us keep our costs down because we're going to have to go into a lot of R&D, marketing, supply, but it would ultimately help us to achieve our goal of staying green. Now, the low-hanging fruit plan. We decided to spell low the French way, which also means water. We believe this will help us triple our revenue. We believe it'll help us keep our costs down. And we also, with some of the initiatives we'd like to introduce, we think it'll help us to stay green and accomplish our goals. So now we're going to introduce the low-hanging fruit plan.
So Daniel, I'm sure you're asking, what is our low-hanging fruit plan? And as my colleague said, it's a little bit of a play on words because of meanings. Number one, as we said earlier, this is not the sexiest plan out there. There's a lot more rigorous, just huge changes we can make. But we feel like we've got a good product and we have a lot of resources very close within our grasp that we can use to take us to the next level and to where Catterton wants us to be. So it's the low-hanging fruit. It's easy to pick. But it's also water, because at the end of the day, we don't think expanding into the juice market or to completely giving up bottled water in its entirety is the solution for our company. So the low-hanging fruit plan, what it is, we're going to stay with bottled water but make small adjustments to increase profitability. Number two, we're going to leverage our relationship with Catterton to expand our geographic reach. And then finally, we're going to have a retooling strategy to anticipate market changes, because as we said earlier, we don't quite know where bottled water is going to be in 5 years. How we're going to do that? We're going to leverage distribution, work with Catterton to increase stores and retail outlets, use Catterton's aid to get into the U.S. market, but do it incrementally in baby steps. We can't do it all at once. We need to explore expanding product offerings within bottled water, not going into juices, but seeing what tweaks we can make to our products. And then finally, we've got a loyal customer base in Quebec. We need to make sure we keep them happy. So as we go into the different elements of this plan, we're going to have a sourcing strategy that looks to make sure we have adequate supply. We want to have a distribution strategy that looks at complementary products and more stores, getting us into some of Catterton's resources. We want to have a marketing plan that deals with product, promotions, price, and then finally sustainability in two senses. We want to look at our environmental footprint, where we need to be as a company, but then also long-term market trends and how we can be sustainable in the long term.
One thing that's important to realize, as we try to triple our revenue, that means we must also double, triple, or even more the supply of water. Now, we depend on a natural resource. So what are we going to do? What's our plan here? This is something that we need to address now and think about. So as we move on, the first step is, while we sold a lot of water previously, we still need to make sure that, because we rely on a natural resource, that we have enough supply. We need to do a study. If we have a study on hand, we need to consult that and make sure that we have adequate supply to handle what our goals are as far as selling water. Next step, if we need to purchase more capacity, this is great because this might be a time to buy. With so many resources and a lot of bottled water companies struggling, there might be an opportunity to get something on the cheap. So we need to look at that as well. Based on that, we also need to make sure that as we know what the supply level is, that we have adequate tools in our facilities to produce that supply. Again, we do depend on a natural resource, but we also depend on human resources. We depend on our capital. So we need to make sure that we have adequate needs there. And those come into the overall broad picture of our supply chain that we need to focus on going forward.
One of the key things we really need to look into is the distribution ability of our product. The reason that really killed us in the very beginning and forced us into bankruptcy in 2000 was our loss of a distribution network. Catterton brings to the table a very interesting proposition. Catterton owns a large supply of food and beverage businesses, including things such as Sweet Leaf Iced Tea, Outback Steakhouse, and a large portfolio of other restaurants and products. So what we really need to do is we really need to analyze their beverage lineup, especially the Sweet Leaf Iced Tea. We need to find out how their distribution network works, who they're partnered with, and where they distribute to. And then what we'd like to do is basically leverage that network or that of any other complementary product in the Catterton family and be able to introduce them to the Northeast United States, places like New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, or Maine, relatively close and still within our delivery window. And really, in Canada, we need to continue to add stores as is possible, especially as these exclusivity agreements subside. And we also need to focus on the away-from-home segment, because this is really where we can garner our revenue, especially with some of the new products we'll talk about soon.
So the marketing plan has a variety of components. First and foremost, we need to address the issue of our products. We plan to change the variety of SKUs by looking at different bottle levels and also looking at alternatives such as vitamin water. We also need to expand our sales outlets, and as we said before, we want to utilize our relationships with Catterton and their distribution network. And finally, how? We're trying to reach new customers, we're trying to expand the pie, and in order to do this, we need to promote our campaign, and additionally, we need to promote what we're doing. We're a sustainable company, and we're not necessarily getting that message out there. We need to make sure that we are selling who we are and what we do, because that's our greatest value proposition.
Okay, so let's start first with the what, the product. What should we do to our product? Well, in the short term, we think we need to offer one more size of our bottled water. Right now we have 500 milliliters. We think perhaps a 375, slightly smaller. We can get that into the stores we already have at a slightly lower price point. It might pick up a few customers who aren't currently willing to pay the full amount for a large bottle of water. We also want to look at one of those squirt tops. I know when I'm working out and I'm running, I can't be bothered to unscrew a cap, so we think looking into something where you can easily have it in hand as you're jogging, squirt tops that we could sell at a slight premium over what we're selling now would be a wonderful product we could easily get on the shelves. Looking more long term, we want to make sure that we start researching right now the possibility of adding a vitamin or some sort of flavored component to our water. There's a lot of companies such as Vitamin Water that charge a premium for their products. And the fact that we have pure spring water could let us differentiate ourselves in that market. So we put aside some money for R&D. Going on to where the place is, of course, in Canada, we need to get those new products we want to offer immediately on the shelves at Loblaw where we currently are. Number two, as we're already doing, we're sure we need to keep approaching those green markets and grocery stores to try and get our products on their shelves as well. With Catterton behind us now, we can afford to pay those shelving fees necessary to do that. And then finally, keep approaching other grocery stores as these exclusivity agreements come to an end. When we look at the U.S., I'm sorry if we could go back. When we look at the U.S., we need to look at the vendors who are selling Catterton products in some of those northeastern states like Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Maine. If they've got Breyer's ice cream on the shelf, if they've got Sweet Tea, we need to make sure that we have our products on those same vendor shelves in the U.S. We also need to look at, as my colleagues mentioned, the Catterton restaurants. Now, we realize some, like Outback Steakhouse, may not be the best fit for green water, bottled water products, but we don't know all of their restaurant holdings right now, so we need to look into that. Perhaps there's one that's an excellent fit. And then finally, same thing that we're doing in Canada, we need to look at one of those Whole Foods market. That might be really hard to get into, but with Catterton behind us, we're sure there's some green grocery stores that would be happy to get one of the most eco-friendly bottled waters on their shelves. Now, when we look at the how and really the promotion of it, we have to do two things, because in Canada, we need to continue to promote ourselves as a regional choice. We are from Quebec. We've got relationships here, so we can't lose that. At the same time, we really haven't been promoting how eco-friendly we are. So we need to, we thought about doing a campaign where if you bring your empty Naya water bottles back to a store, you get 5 cents off your next purchase. Of course, we'll need to talk to our distributors about that, but that's one idea of a campaign. We need to, of course, continue to give 1% of profits to environmental causes. We don't want to increase that, but as we increase revenue, that actual number is going to go up. We need to cross-promote, of course, with Catterton products. So, for example, perhaps on their Breyers ice cream, we could have a manufacturer's coupon that would let someone get a discount to our bottled water. As for the U.S., and of course we need to make sure, if possible, to get our products into the hands of regional celebrities. Just let people know that people out there who are associated perhaps with the environmental movement are drinking our product. In the U.S., again, do the manufacturer's coupons. Try and capitalize on Catterton's huge network of different products. And then we also need to have in-store displays focusing on perhaps that our water is the green choice, is the eco-friendly choice.
So we address the fact that we're a sustainable company, and we really want to look forward as to where we want to go in terms of sustainability. First and foremost, we need to understand our customer better. Are we really meeting all the needs of the sustainable consumer? And this is something we need to look into. Furthermore, we need to further exploit partnerships. For example, an organization like Business for Social Responsibility has consumer products working groups, so we can really team together, form thought partners to see if we're really at the forefront of the sustainable industry. Another example is we should partner with NGOs, maybe possibly getting certified by the Rainforest Alliance. We also, and this is really important, is we need to make sure that our design is for the environment. We need to think of end-of-life, cradle-to-grave, and make sure that our bottled waters are not only leaving the door sustainably, such as being 100% recycled, but also coming back through the value chain by starting an end-of-life collection plan. And we realize that this takes money and time, so we really plan to put our resources into looking to that in the future. And finally, keep doing what we're doing. We're a leader in the industry, and so we want to keep doing that as well. And so looking 10 years out, we want to be on the forefront. So as we said before, with the product line, we're going to look at different SKUs. But additionally, in addition to vitamin water, we also need to see about glass bottles. Is this something that the sustainable movement is going to be looking for? So we really need to look at the trends in the industry. Glass bottles are also reusable. So really, our filling station is going to be the next wave of the future. The bottle industry can change. We need to put the proper money and resources into addressing the market changes.
As we look at our timeline, there are some things that we can get going with right now. There are some things that we can wait a little bit to start going. But the biggest things right now is we need to start new product development, new SKUs. Our distribution, we need to start looking at moving into the U.S. We need to get with Catterton and some of the heads of those companies that Catterton is a part of and figure out how we can distribute our products better so we can all gain revenue. This helps everybody out. We can start researching and adding to our water supply sources. This is something that we need to address. We need to start addressing this right now while possibly market prices are really good. And also with promotion, we need to start pushing our green and making sure that people know who we are. A little bit more out in the future, as we start looking at tripling our revenues 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road as our goal ends in sight, we need to continue to bolster our distribution through the United States and Quebec and that part of Canada. We also need to look at introducing those products which we feel will sell to our consumers. And we also need to continue to introduce the end-of-life collection processes. Now, for a brief budget, what we figured is that based on our analysis that we brought in about $2.1 million per year. And so we figured cost of goods sold would be about 65%. As we move on to 2014, we'll get about $6.3 million. Now, the biggest things that we'd like to change is we'd like to increase the marketing budget from about 15 to 21% and then reducing it back down to 18%. In the end, we feel that although our net income margin will decrease, our total net income is going to double.
So, Daniel, we've got some additional considerations that we can certainly go over during the question and answer period. just to summarize, as we said before, we know this is not the sexiest strategy out there, but we think it's realistic. We think it's going to make Catterton happy, which right now as our new owners is the most important thing. And we think it's going to help us stay true to our roots, stay true to what we do best, and it's going to allow us to be well positioned for any market changes in the bottled water industry that might happen in the future. It really is the low-hanging fruit, and we thank you so much for your time.
Please finish your sentence, South Carolina.
And look forward to questions.
Thank you very much. On one of your slides, actually, it said alternatives. Mm-hmm. There was a comment about revolutionizing the water industry. Could you expand on that? Because I'm just quite curious and quite interested.
Mm-hmm. What that means is right now, the trend was that people started purchasing water because of the health trend. It was perceived as a healthier option than Coca-Cola, let's say. And then gradually the environmental movement began to take set, and the demand started to go down. So then within the water industry, what do? Is the demand going to continue to remain stagnant, or is it going to go up? And revolutionizing the bottle industry would mean to take the bet that the bottled water industry is continue to go down and maybe even nosedive, and start getting into more of the fill stations, more of the bulk water. And so really it's taking the gamble that the water industry bottled water is going to go down drastically.
And we think, with the fill stations, something like that, and as my colleague put in our plan, we want to keep that as an option for the future. But realistically, in the coming 4 years, is that going to happen? Is the bottled water industry completely going to go away? No, it's not. We have new owners and Catterton partners that want to see a good return on their investment, and so we think to just throw everything out and completely revolutionize at this point is not the wise thing to do.
One of the points that you mentioned was looking at the life cycle, the complete life cycle from an environmental perspective. And your suggestion of opening, for example, collection points at retailers, giving 5 cents off your next purchase, etc. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't we be shooting ourselves in the foot by making it more complex for our distribution partners to do business with us? We have a distribution problem as it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things about that is a lot of our distribution partners, yes, indeed, it would be making it more complex. However, it also would give some visibility to the distribution partner themselves as doing something that's more eco-friendly, which is something that a lot of these larger distribution partners are really just trying to get out there. If they're going to be selling a green product, the fact that they're doing something to help out with the green movement as well. So it would be more complicated, but at the same time, it also have extra benefits for both us and the distribution partner.
And I think just to clarify, if that wasn't clear before, that's really something we envision specifically in this region. This isn't going to be something we roll out in the U.S. and all across Canada. It's really going to be centered where we have a strong market, we've got a good relationship with certain distributors, and we can do it on sort of a small scale because people know us right now because we're a regional brand. They don't always know that we're the most eco-friendly. So if we want to start differentiating ourselves in that way, we think we need to do something in this market as we enter new markets and promote ourselves as being very eco-friendly. We need to make sure our core current customers are aware of that as well.
I'm a little concerned that our new owners aren't going to be overly excited about the phrase low-hanging fruit. Is there anything in our plan that we can use to excite them?
Yeah, I definitely think while our plan isn't sexy, and that's one thing that we want to lay out. Our plan, yeah, it's not going to be sexy. We are going to try and focus on low-hanging fruit. We want to realistically capture that tripling the revenue. But there are some things that we can't take away of, and there are some things that we can market to not only Catterton but also the other distributors that Catterton has. We can focus on the more greening of our process. We can switch to 100% recycled materials. We can start opening up some of our wildlife preserve that's around our, where we supply our water, around our spring. We can open that up to the public so we can get some additional revenue from there. That's something that we could look into that will increase the notoriety of our brand. As people come in and they see this wonderful ecological preserve, they'll notice that's from Naya. That's one thing that we can sell to them. Also, we know that we can sell to them that, yeah, while revolutionizing the market isn't going to triple our revenue and double our profit, there are some things that we need to look into. And there are some things that if we get on the forefront and make sure that Catterton knows and that they understand that we're looking into, that they will trust us to be able to anticipate market trends. As we're going out and we lay out our plan and let them know what we're looking into and exactly where we think the water industry is going, they're going to buy into this because, first and foremost, it makes sense. We wanted to have a program that is reasonable and grounded in reality. And then we also want them to know that we are going to be looking into the sustainability and to make sure that our company will be viable long term.
And just to add on that, we also have a campaign with the layout of the bottle to separate ourselves from our competitor. Maybe for an Earth Day, we can do a new design that will gain visibility in the shelves.
Part of your plan entails convincing other CEOs of companies of Catterton to get on board with our plan, assuming that these guys have already their own strategies locked up. Suggest a course of action to make it compelling for them to do business with us as well.
I think the biggest thing that we can sell to them is cross-promotion and cross-branding, is we want to incorporate the entire family of brands. We're not just looking to sell our products through Breyers or Outback or the entire core products that they have, but we also want them to be able to use us. We want to make this a family venture. We want to increase the entire brand portfolio of our company. So as we allow, as the CEOs, as we get them to buy in and also sell them, that they'll be able to market and distribute through some of our products, we feel that's the biggest selling point of our plan. And also they'll be able to utilize some of our distribution networks that we have already established in Quebec and gain market share and gain sales and revenue. So we feel that's one of the strongest points that we can sell to some of the other CEOs within our brand family.
As I understand it, through the initial few years, you're looking to focus primarily on revenue growth in the Quebec market, with a little bit in the U.S. We already have 22% share in the Quebec market. As our share rises, if one of our competitors responds with a price war, how should we respond?
That's a great question, and I think there's a couple of things that we need to know before we do that. Which competitors these are, because as we said, we want to differentiate ourselves on a few things. In our value proposition, price was not one of them. We don't think the main reason people are going to come to us is for price. We think they're coming to us because we're a regional brand that they know, and we also think that we're differentiated based on the fact that, for example, we just got audited by a British organization who said that we'd lowered our carbon footprint by 16% in the past 5 years. These are the types of people that we think we're going to continue to grow our market share with. So it's not always, if we're going to do a price war, it would have to be someone who's seeking similar clients as we are. So for example, someone that's going after those same people that want to get the more eco-friendly water movement. If that's the case, then we need to start looking at perhaps lowering some of our different prices slightly. We weren't given a whole lot, I think, as far as margins. We want to look into that and see if there's perhaps a better size we could offer with higher margins. But I would be cautious about us getting into a price war, because at the end of the day, that's not why people are buying us. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And one of the interesting things about that is that although we have a large portion of the Quebec market, we don't necessarily need a large portion of the U.S., of the northeastern U.S. market that we're going into. If we were to assume just simply that the U.S. market we were going into was about 20 million people, that's roughly about a sixth. Well, actually, it's less than 10% of the U.S. bottled water market. So it's about $660 million. If we only take 0.5% of that, that's going to give us enough money to have our absolute value to make the triple revenue number.
If Breyers is a well-known name in the United States, are we going to have to invest any significant amount of money to create brand awareness for NAIA to support our partners in developing the market for our water in the States?
I mean, definitely we are going to have to invest some money, and that's what our budget reflected, is that we had projected that we're spending about 15% on marketing. Now, we'd like to bump that up into the 22% range, because as we move into the U.S., we need to look at how we promote with our products. We can look at promotion in the stores, stands, and we also, yes, we're going to face a little bit of a tough time introducing a new brand in the U.S. We were already there once. Some people may remember us. Probably not, though. So we are going to have to increase the marketing spend, and that's what we budgeted for. We would like to increase the marketing spending so that we can introduce ourselves into that market and hopefully gain just a little bit of that market share.
And one thing we have to remember that our initial U.S. entry strategy is fairly confined to the areas around the U.S. border with Quebec. So even though Breyers is a well-known U.S. brand, we really only have to focus on that particular area in the very beginning, and then we can kind of incrementally move out from there in order to realize our growth.
One of the rather worrisome trends for us recently have been municipalities that have started to either consider or outright start to ban the sale of bottled waters. And similarly, a number of university campuses have been doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. How do we react to that? Is there something we should be doing to try to stop that? Or what do we do if this becomes more widespread?
Right. And that's a great question. We actually talked about that because I believe it's in Venice in Italy, the government has actually launched a big campaign to promote tap water. So we looked at it from a couple of issues. When we looked out into the future, we absolutely need to be putting a little bit of money into trying to anticipate certain trends. So for example, let's say we don't anticipate that happening in the very short term, but let's say in the next few years, government decides to outlaw bottled water among campuses, as your example. We want to look into perhaps getting into those large jugs that you bring to offices. Simple ways that we can get our product out there. We think that way you can actually, there's higher margins in that business, so that might be something we want to explore. We also looked at the filling stations where perhaps you buy a certain type of bottle and are able to fill up at these filling stations throughout Quebec, because we don't think that issue is going to come up in the northeastern part of the United States in the short term. And then finally, we'd want to make sure we have some money just for an ad campaign, because let's face it, even if people start drinking tap water, there are times when you walk into a filling station, you don't want to go for tap water in that sense. There are times when people really don't feel like they have a choice except but to buy bottled water. We want to make sure our consumers know that if they don't have the choice and they have to buy bottled water, that we're the greenest choice.
And we also want to sell the message to those stakeholders involved that we have come a ways. We will be producing with 100% recycled materials. Our plant only produces 2% waste. We recycle 98% of everything else. So overall, although bottled water maybe isn't the best solution for some of the customers, and that's what the government feels, we do feel that we have taken a lot of steps further than some of our competitors in the bottled water, soda, sports drinks industries to make sure that our product that we can sell to the governments and municipalities, that we can let them know that, hey, we really don't produce that much waste. We produce from recycled products, and you can know that this is a quality product by that.
Understand why you want to go under the Catterton sort of family. Okay, I understand the strategy. When you're going into the United States, do you think we're going to be marketing under our own brand name, or is this going to be different brand name? And if so, I want to know why.
We think that we need to market under our own brand name, and there's a couple of reasons. Although, as my colleague mentioned earlier, that there's not a lot of people that remember us from our initial foray into that market, there are a few. And so we don't, to completely change right now, we don't think that that's the answer. Number two, that can cost a lot more money than you're consistently doing very different ad campaigns. As we mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, we're still a small player and we're only going to take a small share of the market. We feel like we have a great history and a lot of our value proposition comes from the strong reputation that we have. So we think to change that and to try and put it under a new name just wouldn't be the way to go for us.
For some reason, Catterton overheard you saying that 3 times profit might not be much, and now they're asking for 6 times. What fundamental part of the plan would have to change to make it 6 times?
I think a lot of the plan that would need to change is examining our distribution networks. A big thing is supply, like we talked about. Do we have the resources, and can our spring supply that much water? Can our distribution network handle that much? We'd also need to look at expanding into more regions quicker. Because if they said, well, we think this is such a great plan that we have trust in you guys to go 6 times or 8 times, we would need to look at expanding a lot faster. And on their side, that might require a little bit more capital and investment from them, and they would need to realize that as they're coming at us with these new plans, that these things are going to cost money. So we need to make sure that we lay the groundwork for that from them.
Okay, thank you. We have 1 minute left. And as we did with some of the other teams, I'd like to give that to you. In addition to everything that you've told us, is there anything else you'd like to expand upon or you'd like us to consider in your answers?
I think that's a great question. I think we want to hit home the fact that there's a lot of risk, and we did have an additional consideration slide. We tried to account for some of those. I think the main elephant in the room is, as we heard earlier this week, someone say the silent competitor. There's something that could be out there, and we don't know what it is, that could completely revolutionize something. Our company, we don't know how long we are away from having 100% recycled bottles. We don't know what new technology is going to be out there that could just completely change everything. And so I think as we go through, as we've tried to outline in our presentation.
Please finish your sentence.
We want to keep ourselves as open to that, to realizing what's out there as possible.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you.